The question of buying versus leasing solar comes up all the time, and depending upon who you talk to, can be rather controversial. What is the best financial decision though? In order to figure that out, we need to figure out what the total cost of solar ownership per year is in order to get a fair comparison between leasing and buying solar. It sounds pretty simple, but there are a lot of factors that we want to break down in today's video. And in addition, there's a lot of intangibles that you want to figure out before buying or leasing solar, such as tax credits, long-term savings, and just the overall feeling of ownership. Costs these days can vary quite widely as the current solar loan interest rates are higher than ever. And so if you do want cheaper initial monthly payments for the first few years, people usually tend to lease their solar system in this situation. So I don't know if you know this already, but when you're leasing a solar system, you're basically renting the equipment for a set period of time. About 20 to 25 years is the standard term. And at the end of the term, you need to give that equipment back to the solar installer. And during those 20, 25 years, you're making monthly payments on the system. So let's just say in a hypothetical situation, you have a power bill of $250 a month, with your house using 10,000 kilowatt hours throughout the year. A solar company offering a lease may determine that with an 8 kilowatt system, they can wipe out your power bill entirely, bringing your payments to the utility company down to $0 over the course of the year. Now, in exchange for them coming out to your property, installing and commissioning the equipment, and maintaining it over the course of the term, they charge a payment of $175 a month. At this point, the numbers check out and it seems like a pretty good deal. However, there's one large caveat, and this is where the value of the lease comes into question. Within the agreement, homeowners must agree to a 2.9% annual escalation in their monthly bill, making it so that by year 25, they would be looking at a $357 a month monthly payment towards their solar installer. We do the math, in 25 years into leasing that system, they've paid over $75,000 for the 8 kilowatt system. Now, at the end of the 25-year term, the solar installer would remove the equipment, repatch the roof, and the two parties would go their separate ways. As you can see in this scenario, the solar installer really makes the majority of the money in the latter half of the term. And this is why they're going to make it very difficult for homeowners to get out of the lease. While you can make early payments on the system, large prepayment penalties will make it not worth it. And don't think twice about trying to purchase to own from the installer, because they will often charge 2 to 3 times fair market price. Regardless of what you think about this option, about 40% of all residential solar systems are using leases. And if you're currently gathering quotes, you may find that a lot of companies lead with the bid offer, as it can be very lucrative for the solar installer. Though with large utility companies increasing their rates 4, 5, even 10% annually compounded, leasing still makes sense, and most homeowners still will save money over the long term with a solar lease. However, the lease is not the only option for going solar. Most people going solar will choose to own the system, whether that be purchasing it outright or using financing to pay for the system. So let's go back to that hypothetical situation where you have a $250 a month electric bill and you're hoping to use solar to knock down the bill. Just like the lease, the 8 kilowatt system should satisfy your electrical needs by producing the amount of power that your home uses over the year. In this instance, however, we will start with the cash price of the system. The cost of paying for solar can differ depending upon where you live and what kind of an installation it is, whether it be ground mount, roof mount, and the number of arrays involved, and the equipment that you choose can also be a factor. However, unlike leases where the companies are renting you the equipment of their choice, you will have the option to shop different panels, inverters, and potentially batteries if you want to include that in the project. Most full-service solar installers will include in their bid all of the cost of installation, permitting, and engineering, as well as a warranty package over the course of 20 to 25 years. In this example, we will use round numbers and say that in this instance, the average quote for the system came in at $25,000. And so at this point, you could simply purchase the system cash, where you would just have a deposit of $1,000 to $2,000 upfront, followed by the remaining payments due right before and after the completion of installation. At this point, you would now own the system entirely while still having the 20 to 25 year warranties provided by the installer. Now, one of the largest benefits of purchasing solar under the ownership model is going to be tax credits. At this time in 2024 and through 2032, United States homeowners will be eligible for a 30% solar federal tax credit, meaning as long as you're the homeowner and you have a tax liability over the 5-year period that exceeds 30% of the total cost of your solar system, you can save that much more money on the system. And so in this instance, with a system at the price of $25,000, we would be incentivized with a $7,500 tax credit. Additionally, some states such as New York, Maryland, and Oregon will provide state tax credits to lessen the cost, as well as others. Therefore, once tax credits are added into the equation, most residential solar systems will have a buyback period of 6 to 12 years, just dependent upon how much you're currently paying for power. And when I refer to buyback period, it's just the time that it will take to recoup the initial cost through energy savings. Now, if you're looking to own the system, but you're not looking to write a big upfront check, then financing is possible, and it is the most popular option for going solar. Most solar financing programs will have a term length of 20 to 25 years with no money down and fixed rate payments. The interest rate you receive can vary greatly depending upon the borrower's credit rating and the broad economic factors, but at the time of this recording, you can expect to pay about 5 to 9%. It's also important to note that unlike car dealerships, solar companies do not make any money by bumping up the offered financing rates, nor by charging you extra financing fees. They simply partner with third-party financing companies to offer more payment options to potential customers. So if we go back to the example of the 8 kilowatt system that was offered at the cash price of $25,000, we can take a look at the terms and see that to move forward with this project, we would not have our first monthly payment until 2 months after the completion of the installation to allow for sufficient time for the panels to pass inspection and get turned on. At this point, the payments would begin. With a 25-year loan at 8.99%, the monthly payments for the first 18 months would be $157. At month 18, and this is pretty standard among solar financing companies, the solar financing company is going to give us an option to either pay down the loan even further by applying the tax credit or have the loan re-amortize at this point to the higher amount. If we put our tax credit back towards the system, the monthly payment would remain at $157 for the remainder of the loan, but otherwise, if we chose to keep it, no worries, the monthly payment would go up to $220 a month. Now, if you do the math yourself, what you're gonna find in both of these instances, if you break down the numbers, is that a large portion, in fact, over half of the monthly payment is going to be going towards paying off interest on the loan. So if you have the means, and this is what I always tell my clients, pay the systems off as early as possible. There are no prepayment penalties like there may be with mortgages or car loans. In fact, you can pay large portions of the loan off over time and have the loan re-amortize multiple times to that lower payment. As you can now see, unlike the lease, the solar financing will likely have an initial higher monthly payment. However, over the long term, as a reminder, that is a fixed monthly payment, whereas the lease is going up over time. Now, you may find a solar contractor offering loans at 3 to 4%, or if you've been quoted something like this in the past year, oftentimes these loans will come with high upfront fees that they'll bake into the loan. So it's always a good idea to ask for the same as cash price financing option, which again is going to be in that range of 6 to 9% APR if you want the best long-term savings option. So now what you're going to see is that when we compare these two options, leases are typically going to have lower payments initially for the first 7 to 8 years. However, since you're pretty much stuck in the contract for a 25-year period and you can't really buy down the system without paying ridiculously high prices and fees, where you would likely regret your decision is in the latter half of the term, where you would have very high bills, as for the monthly payment has been compounding at 3% every single year. Financing, on the other hand, will have a higher initial payment than will leasing, in fact, even greater if you're not looking to put the tax credit back towards the system. However, it will provide you with the greatest long-term savings, especially the sooner that you can pay the system off to avoid payments on interest. Again, most people choose to go solar because with utility rates going up 3 to 5% any given year compounding, a fixed monthly payment on a solar system that you own becomes a great long-term savings vehicle for your house. You will see some people present the case that if you're not eligible for any tax credits, leasing makes more sense, but even if you break down the math in those instances, the numbers still don't really check out. Now, one scenario that we must go over, as it always comes up, is what happens in the instance that we move. If you own your solar system, you will have a couple of options. Number one, you can move the panels with you to your new residence and have your previous installer initiate a new install for you on a cost based on the transportation distance and the system size. Or number two, you can sell the house with your panels paid off and add the appraised value of the solar system to the sale price of your home. With leasing, however, this gets a lot trickier, as for a lot of these companies do not want to deinstall and reinstall their equipment. And so in most instances, since you cannot really pay off these systems like you could if you owned, and then just add the appraised value to the house. You will, in many circumstances, have to sell the house with the stipulation that the new homeowners assume the lease agreement. If you've ever spoken to real estate agents, especially in states like California where leases can be super common, you've likely heard horror stories about homeowners looking to sell their house, and they in fact have to bring down the value of the house to account for the fact that the new homeowner has to assume their lease. To quickly break down who would be better suited for each of these two options, there can be a case made for people who are retired, who are not working, or just maybe don't have a tax liability to lease. However, for these people, in a lot of circumstances, going solar in the first place may not even make sense. I have seen and heard that many of these solar companies that go to door and pitch leases specifically will target lower income households, as they pitch very heavy the immediate and monthly savings, which can be very high. However, much of this is predatory sales and looked down upon by the industry. Otherwise, if you have a tax liability and you're looking for long-term savings with the system, as well as potentially the flexibility to move the system with you as you go and possibly pair the system with the other equipment like batteries and EV chargers, then purchasing the system outright makes the most sense. As I mentioned earlier, interest rates are between 5 and 9% for same as cash financing. So if you can pay for the system cash, that's always best. Otherwise, sometimes I have seen homeowners get better deals from local banks, credit unions with low interest rate loans. So what I want to sum up here is that buying is probably better for somebody that meets the 4 criteria. Number 1, you want the best financial option in most situations, especially long term. Number 2, you want to take advantage of federal and state tax credits to lower your tax liability. Number 3, you want the flexibility to pair your system with other equipment such as batteries or EV chargers and move the system with you as you move. And number 4, you actually like the sense of ownership, and that makes you feel proud and gives you some peace of mind. Leasing is probably better for somebody who meets the following criteria. So number 1, you want the highest immediate monthly savings on your electric bill by paying the least amount of money for your system upfront on a monthly basis for the first 5 or so years. And number 2, you want the ability to potentially transfer over the lease agreement and payments to a new homeowner if you happen to move properties and they agree to do it. Now, leasing versus owning solar is not the only decision that you have to make when going solar. There are other things to take into account, such as equipment and the contractor to pick. So that's why I made this video going over the top 5 scams in the solar industry in 2024, which has gone viral. So make sure you go check that out. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time.